I can't even. Let me keep this as cute as possible. Hello, friends and family. We are here to review the latest episode of The Real Housewives of Atlanta, season 15, episode 15. The girls are wrapping up, and I already talked about like how messy the like wrap up is, and there was like a ton of chat on Twitter. There's always a ton of chat on Twitter, but like more recently, kind of like yesterday, bleeding into today about like how bad production is. So all that aside, because I feel like we've discussed that a lot, this episode was it just felt like we were trying to cram a lot of things into this episode. And like I said, if we were going to cram a lot of things, then it should have been into the season. Like I just feel like with Housewives, there should just be like 1,000 things going on at once, as you probably would expect there to be with six, I guess, women, 6 to 7 women that you're following. You're following their reality because even with one little old me, there's 1,000 things going on. So, child, I just don't know. But, with there being now one episode left, but with this one, there were two, they're trying to do some squeezing. So, we'll go through the episode and we'll discuss it. And they start the episode off, and essentially, we don't get to anything important until they're like doing like the movie. Like they're finally doing the movie. Drew's at Kandi's house, and they're doing the whole production or whatever. I guess part of the like squeeze of the Drew and Ralph fallout storyline that they're trying to make is that she didn't, they make a point to tell us that she didn't tell him everything about the movie, so essentially I guess he doesn't know too much about the role, and that the girl is going to be having intimate scenes with another woman. So whatever, she's just like, I didn't tell Ralph everything about the movie, and it's fine because I don't know everything about his job. Two things with that. I don't know why it would be such a big deal that she's having these intimacy scenes with women in the movie to the point that she can't tell her husband. So that's weird to me. And then the obvious that doesn't even need to be stated, but her not knowing everything about Ralph's job. But we could have assumed that, even without her saying, because we don't know anything about Ralph's job either. I don't know that Ralph does either. So those things are interesting. Whatever. Then Monyetta shows up to the set. I think she has a role in the movie, I believe. She was at the table read, so she shows up. She's there. Monyetta and Drew and Kandi start talking about what happened last episode, where Monyetta spilled the tea that Courtney allegedly called Drew the B word. Drew reiterates that she's not referring to her as cousin Courtney anymore. She's just Courtney. And, she feels strongly about being called the B word. They also feel strongly, they being Kandi and Monyetta, they're like, well, Courtney says she doesn't use the B word at all, but she definitely used it. I don't really know why that's such a big deal. I don't really know why we needed to follow that, but, I don't work on production. And, unbeknownst to us, Mayetta has a video of this. I guess that makes sense. I guess I had assumed that the video was Marlo's, but maybe they both have videos, and maybe I'm focusing on things that don't matter, just like production does. But, whatever. Mayetta pulls up this video. It's the same footage that we saw last episode. It's the same edit that they did last episode, where they replayed Courtney saying the B word 17 times and her pointing at Sonya. So that was a little irritating, because it's like, get a little bit more creative, I guess. Like it literally was just the same touch and go type of thing, but whatever. Now that I'm thinking about it, I guess I will say, not that I care, but there is still a dispute between whether Courtney was calling Drew the B word, or she was calling Sonya the B word. Mayetta did make, just for analysis sake, again, I don't care. If I'm going to make anything abundantly clear, I don't care about this. I'm going to let y'all know. But for analysis sake, Mayetta did make a good point, because Kandi's like, well, was she calling Drew the B word, or was she calling Sonya the B word? Because she did point, and that was noted. And Mayetta's like, well, why would she call Sonya the B word to her face? And I'm like, that's a good point. And then even when I was watching Speak on it, Kandi was still very, at that point, obviously that all happened in the past, and all things have been seen, and the reunion has happened. So obviously, I'm sure they've discussed it. So Kandi's still adamant that or seems to be adamant that Courtney called Drew the B word. So I'm like, okay. So I started to think about it a little bit more. And not that it matters for the 17th time, but it does seem like, sometimes when maybe not everybody communicates like this, but I know I do, and I know people that do. When you're having a conversation with people, sometimes you'll point to the person that you're talking to, like, and check this, like, oh, this is another point, or like, oh, and meanwhile, like, you're really directing the conversation towards them, not necessarily the substance of the conversation, but you're directing, like, oh, and girl, guess what, like, so sometimes people communicate like that. So I had just decided on my own there was a possibility that Courtney was pointing to Sonya just in response, because they were having a conversation. It was very like this, what I'm saying, like they're kikiing. So I decided that there was a possibility that she was just pointing to Sonya like, oh girl, and another thing, and she's like, that B, but she wasn't pointing to Sonya to say that B. She was just pointing as in like, in response, and check this, and guess what, that B, but still possibly referencing Drew. It doesn't matter, but I did still find that to be a possibility. And I just wanted to share because it just kind of came into my head, and it is a possibility. I'm wondering if anybody else picked up on it. But otherwise, today is Monday. Happy Monday. It matters just as much as that does. Like, it's very hot in New York. I'm sweating. I have a lot of things going on. Life is lifing. Like, it literally just kind of falls into that laundry list of things. How y'all doing? Whatever. We move on. We get to, they're still doing the movie, whatever. They kind of do that throughout the episode. And I did think it was cool. I guess I did make a note, like, because Kandi was really excited about it. I think this is their first movie that they've done. And, they were doing it out of their house. I don't think that was a big deal, but we'll touch on that a little bit later. But it is really cool that they were able to do the movie. And, obviously they were, working to cut production costs, and they basically funded it out of their pocket. And Kandi feels like the product is really good. Obviously they can't release it right now with the actor strike going on. But yeah, like, so that is cool. But in terms of the episode, I didn't really care about that either. We get to Marlo's event. I initially, which I've said before, I initially thought it was cool because it is a good cause that Marlo is doing for the foster children. I think that is cool. But I also did note in the moment watching the episode that it was super random. Like, I hate when they drop things in the episode, especially an event. Like, you can't just drop an event, especially a substantial event like that, in an episode with no context. I thought that was weird. So because they did that, I already assumed that it wasn't like a full cast event, and my brain is just conditioned to, like, when there are these events, kind of like these side events, there's no context, there's no planning shown, and it's not a full cast event, I don't necessarily pay attention to it that much because I know they're just kind of gonna go past it. However, they did show a bit of it and kind of painted some storyline there as to, like, oh, is Sheree gonna come or not? So I think that was some wasted time because Sheree did come. I wasn't really invested in the suspense of it before she came. It wasn't gonna go anywhere because the season is ending next week. So it really, another thing that didn't matter. But all in all, I think that's a cool event to have, and I like that she's invested in that cause. But it is weird that production chose A, to include that, B, how to include that. Like, it just, especially knowing what we know now, we've seen like the Twitter stuff, and there's a big outrage now because they didn't talk much about Kenya's, like, her hair salon. I guess it finally opened. We saw at the kind of like middle of the season that she was working on it, beginning to middle, I believe. But I guess she had a party, and that was a full cast event, but they didn't show that. So that is weird. But I honestly cannot get into the weirdness of production this episode. Like, I'm too hot. It's just, we know what's going on. Y'all already know. And we have time to discuss that. So yeah, the event. I did note though that, what's his name? I can't remember his name. Whatever Marlo's man's name is, he showed up late, so I thought that was interesting, but whatever, me being petty. But I also did like, this is a moment that I actually did like and did care for, because I said, like, for Marlo to come off more authentic and have a true, like, arc on the show and really show her humanity, I think she would have to admit to, like, the insecurities that we all have as people because we're humans. That's why I'm saying it would show the humanity of her. So I like that she did even though I wasn't invested in the storyline of it all, I like that she did say in her confessional that it was going to hurt her if Sheree didn't show up because, she's a foster child and people showing up for her is a really big deal. So I liked being able to see that. Cool. We move on. We're back to the movie. A big thing that I just really didn't like, and it's been sticking with me all day, and I've been thinking about it, is the fact that, and I've been fighting not to tweet Drew about it, because I like Drew, and I'm tired of arguing on Twitter, because I typically don't, but I have been this season. Drew shading the production that Kandi and Todd had set up, because it's always so, like, two-sided, because she started off the episode by saying, like, oh, and I got my own trailer, and oh my gosh, you guys have this, like, intimacy, I don't want, I'm using the word trainer in my head, but that's not what, intimacy, like, coach. Like, they had the, like, professional standard type of things that you would have from my understanding for a movie, but then she goes on to like be filming with Ralph in her trailer, which is very nice. I haven't seen many trailers, so I can't compare, but it was nice. To say like, oh well, I'm filming in her room and we're filming at her house. Like I just can't. Like I won't be doing this anymore. Like if it's not Lifetime and above, I won't be doing it. And I'm just like, I struggle to say this because I like Drew, but it's like, Drew, girl, we haven't even seen you do anything. Like, I guess she had a Lifetime movie, they were saying, the sorority sisters type of thing or whatever, but other than that, I haven't seen any evidence that Drew was just like overly booked. Like, oh, she's just booked all over the place. It kind of came off as like she was doing Kandi and Todd a favor. Like, and she's just like, this is below me, but I'm just gonna go ahead and do it. And it's like, girl, you also got paid. So it's just like, I didn't like that. Like, but then she gets on Twitter. Like I said, like she compliments the trailer, and the coach and all that stuff. She acts like so impressed. Then she gets in the trailer and she's reading them, talking about she would never do a production like that again if it's not Lifetime and above. And then she gets on Twitter as the episode's airing, talking about thank you, Kandi and Todd, for believing in me and giving me the opportunity. Girl, go to hell. For real. So, then they get into this weird conversation where Ralph is asking her, I guess this is when he finds out about what she's doing on the movie scene, and she notes, like, this is the only scene that he's asked her about, the involvement with the woman, and he's just asking very, I guess, stuff that he's entitled to as her husband, but the specific questions that he was asking, if it's true that he didn't ask about anything else with regard to the movie, it is weird that he's asking her, well, did you in the movie? Like that's yeah. So whatever. Then we move on. We finally we're at like Sheree's event, and we're there kind of for like a big part of the episode, because there's this big thing where it started at 4 and Sheree didn't come out till 6:15. So we're there for quite a while. And I did make a note that it was really fun seeing Shamia, Kandi, and Mayetta together, because you just instantly, or I just instantly, when I see them on screen together, you can see the chemistry and you can tell that they're actually friends. And that's a big thing that we're missing from Roa. Everybody knows that. So it's nice to see actual friends on camera together and interacting and like, hey girl, da 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 da. So I enjoyed that. Same thing with King and Cynthia. And I said that, I believe I said that last episode or whatever episode that was. Like, I enjoy seeing that. So if there's a note to be given to production, like we need more of that. But I also feel like that's not something that needs to be stated because it's reality TV. And if you're going to have an ensemble cast, obviously you want that ensemble cast to have genuine relationships, authentic relationships. But then again, we don't have that right now, so maybe it does need to be stated. And I just said it, so we're good. So, that event starts happening. I also said it was really crazy seeing Bob. So I'm also watching season 2 of And Just Like That right now, which is like the continuation of Sex and the City. And it is the 25th anniversary, so they have a lot of like Easter eggs and like nostalgia and like callbacks and like old storylines and old characters popping up. And that's really what this season has been feeling like. This season of Atlanta has been feeling like. I think it was because production was trying to give us a little bit of what we're used to and make it make sense, and it was working a little. So I say all that to say it was really interesting seeing Bob, but also comforting, right? Like, just like seeing those authentic friendships, seeing people that actually connect in an authentic way to storylines that we know and to these characters that we're watching, it was just comforting. Now, Bob is obviously a fool and has always been a fool and never fails to embarrass Sheree if she's not on there doing it herself. But it was interesting seeing him. I'll just quote my own words in my notes. So crazy seeing Bob, and I'll leave it at that. Martell's back, I guess. There's some shade to be thrown there, but again, he is on another reality show, so maybe he only got cleared for 2 appearances. But other than that, it's nice to see him back. We saw him at the beginning, now we're seeing him at the end. Very convenient. Thank you for clocking in. She asks him why he's late. He says 5 kids. I'm like, damn, I didn't know Martell had 5 kids. Again, I don't know much about Martell, but I did do some Googling afterwards. So that was interesting. My note says, damn, in all caps, Martell got 5 kids. Moving on. There's a conflict then. Drew shows up. Kandi had given some context on Speak On It, saying that they had wrapped filming that day, so Drew was very tired, to her credit. She showed up in her I'm tired glasses, and she had on a little chill outfit, but still in the news, still prepared to, hang out. It did kind of give, though, at the beginning of that scene. Like, at first, it felt like she was like reading a text or something, or just kind of like playing Monopoly Go on her phone, maybe. And then somebody said action, and she kind of went, this is crazy. This is so disappointing. So, but yeah, her issue was that her old assistant, I think the guy's name Anthony. Anthony was there. I don't remember. It's one of the last 2 seasons where he played a part between the whole Sheree versus Drew thing, which was always weird because he read both of them and shaded both of them. But for whatever reason, now he's at Sheree's house. Well, not for whatever reason. According to Sheree, he introduced Sheree and Martell, which is also a gag. Like, I can't even say it's good, but the end of the episode definitely was a gag, honey. Because the gag started with her saying this, because I felt like personally it was a little bit of a mystery, because she kept saying like she and Martell had met through a mutual friend, because we were all wondering like, how did y'all meet? We know this relationship is fake, so what's really going on? And she would always say, well, we met through a mutual friend, but she would never say the friend's name. So that's why I kind of felt a little bit more fake. I think we're just prone to Sheree lying and giving half stories, so her not giving the name or like the specific circumstance as to how they met just made it feel like more of a lie. And then there was also like some lure in there that maybe Carlos King was the one that had introduced them. I don't know if Carlos had ever debunked that rumor. I don't know, but what I'm trying to say is there was some mystery behind it, and now we're finding out that it was Anthony who said that Sheree didn't pay her bills last season, and basically said the same about Drew, but then they were arguing, and then, so whatever. But now, she was introduced to Martell by Anthony, so he's invited to all the functions, honey. Of course he's here. So, Drew calls Kandi, of all people. I guess they're good pals because they just did a movie. And she's just like, girl, I'm not going to be able to come in. Like, I'm sitting outside. So Drew calls her homegirl, Mayetta, to make sure Mayetta gets some more filming. And she's like, Mayetta, let's go outside. Let's chat with Drew, which I lived for. Like, make sure your girl gets on the camera. I really enjoyed that. And, Drew's giving her story. They didn't really seem to invest it. I wouldn't either because, girl, we're at the party. The food's probably inside. And we're out here really kind of talking about nothing. Not to take away from her issue. I'm not super invested in it, but what I will say is if he did throw something at her, then that's obviously wrong, and I can understand her not wanting to be in that space. If it were me, if anybody's wondering, if it were me, I probably still would have gone in and did the function and just made sure he didn't speak to me, but I can't speak for Drew. Throwing a shoe at someone, especially in a public space, is very egregious and is kind of nutty. But, his behavior, Anthony's behavior from what we've seen on the show is a little bit nutty. I do think it's interesting, though, because we got the tea as well. I think we're going to speak on it, that this incident occurred at the Lanithia Lounge, Nini's Lounge in Atlanta, which has since closed. I don't know if it was in Atlanta, it was in Georgia, whatever. And it's since closed, but whatever. I never heard about this incident, though, so I'm kind of like, and she said the police came, so I'm going to assume if the police came, there was a police report filed. So I wish that that could have popped up or something, but it never did. So, okay. And, Candy goes back inside to deliver the news. Sheree doesn't really seem fazed by it. She's like, well, he's my buddy. He's going to have to be here. And he's kind of ear hustling and he jumps in like, ain't nobody worried about Drew. So he was clearly ready to be confrontational. Yeah, he was clearly ready to be confrontational. I don't know that it would have reached over to Drew because even Sheree was like, Anthony, you said everything was good between y'all, da da da. And he just started reading Drew. I mean, which wasn't super like entertaining. So I mean, that just back to the waste of time. Like I don't know if that was just kind of like authentically happening or if that was like a kind of like produced or like set up type of thing and they thought that we were going to care about that because Anthony had played a part before. It's an interesting tidbit, but they could have sent it in an email and we could have just moved on. So, that was that. Drew leaves. We don't really touch too much on it, which is so weird because we're ending the season with this big Drew thing and the finale is next week. And we're on the finale eve and Drew ain't filming at the all cast. So it's just like, or Ralph, girl. So whatever. Hitting the mic. I apologize. Do I even? I didn't even want to go into this, but whatever. Just for the girls who weren't listening, and I don't blame you. There's a debate that Anthony threw the shoe at her impromptu, and there's no backstory. I don't know why he would do that, but whatever. And then he comes back and says, "Well, she hit me with her cheap bag first, and then I hit her with a shoe." So I don't know, and I don't care. But again, if he did throw a shoe at her, that's wrong. Moving on. I did like the fact that now that Martell's here, we might as well use him. We might as well close up a storyline. I have noted that I feel like that's a big thing that we're supposed to do on these shows. Like, if we're going to have a conflict, let's have not necessarily a resolution, but at least a conclusion to it. So I did like that Kenya approached him and asked him to speak. And, she basically... it was a little bit cringy because I didn't think that it was going to be, I thought it was going to be like a point of clarification, which it was. But when it comes to Kenya, there's always going to be a little bit of but let me also remind you that you had me fucked up. And I didn't necessarily want to hear that because I'm like, ooh, let's just leave it alone. But I love me some Kenya. So, I respect her for standing in her own. And I don't disagree with her point. And I don't think that it was combative when she said it. She was just explaining to him, the reason that I responded the way that I did to you is because I had to match your energy and I didn't have anybody with me that can go toe to toe with you as a man. So I had to go toe to toe with you. I didn't disagree with that. I didn't think it had to be a big deal. Obviously, Sheree got into her confessional and she's shading Kenya about not having a man, but Sheree, you literally have two men in your house right now simultaneously that always embarrass you. And even when they're not around, you're embarrassing yourself. So, but whatever. That brings me to Bob. This was the best part of the episode, to be honest. Like, this whole just like sequence as it went on was the best part of the episode. And, as it just followed, Bob's walking around with his guests and they start to take this family photo. I hadn't even realized, let me keep this as cute as possible. They start to take this family photo. I feel like we have all seen these types of things play out. They start to take this family photo. I hadn't even realized because I was really thinking like Sheree, the color of Sheree's dress was so distracting for me. Like the nude part for everybody was super cute, but the color of her dress was so distracting for me. Wear a different color, fine, because the party's obviously about you and not about the child. We already know about that. Fine, but the color itself was just distracting. But I guess the family color was pink. Colors, pink and white, maybe, I guess, is what I picked up. So I hadn't even noticed that Martell had on the family color, so I thought that that was very particular, is the word that I'm going to use. And, she gets into the family photo, and then this young lady, very pretty young lady that Bob brought, comes into the family photo, and everybody's immediately like, now who the hell is that? Because she had on the family color, I guess, was the indicator. And we come to find out that that's Bob's daughter. And even more, we come to find out that Sheree's children that she shares with Bob, there are two of them, the youngest two, they know her, allegedly, and have spent time with her at family events. And unbeknownst to Sheree, which I don't believe. I just don't. It's possible, for sure, that she did not know that this young lady existed for the past 20 some odd years. It's definitely possible. Everything's possible. But I just don't. Again, there's something about Sheree that I find hard to. Things are just hard to believe when they involve Sheree. So I feel like she may have had an inkling or may have known. She describes it as when she met Bob, Bob told her that she had two kids, and then subsequently they had two kids together. But then I guess this other young lady was wedged in between there, and she wasn't told about it, which again is possible, but I don't know. The ladies are digging in. They want to ask Bob why. We start to get some tidbits about Bob. King is like, well, I actually met Bob when he was cheating on Sheree because my homegirl was messing around with Bob. And Candy's like, well, I've known Bob since I was a teenager, and I didn't know he had three kids before Sheree. So that's interesting. Like, that's giving me old Deland. I'm having a great time. I'm enjoying it. The last 6 minutes of this episode are spectacular. And they're not produced. Honestly, at this point, it felt like Bob had taken matters into his own hands. Bob and his daughter. And production had just sat back. Thank God. So, I was really enjoying that. We also saw Sheree's friend who previously read Nene. Was that in season one? Season one or season two, the early days. And, she famously read Nene. So I really enjoyed seeing her.
I'm going to get you a sandwich in just a minute.
Don't do that, sweetie. I need plenty. I got room to grow. Give me size one day. Room to grow.
That part, I was wondering if production was purposely doing that because this part of her face, kind of like this, because we saw her little pixie cut. She was looking super cute. This part of her face was showing in about 13 of the frames. She was kind of like right there. So I was like, that's old girl. So that was fun to see. And I would love to see her come on the show because, again, that's an authentic relationship to Sheree. Like, honestly, bring Bob, bring the other daughter, bring homegirl. Like, Martell, please, thank you for coming. But let's, So, I really enjoyed seeing her. Apollo was also there, which I feel like, was that on this season? They had teased. I know that there was a big tease at some point that Apollo was going. That was last season. Because he was in Sheree's fashion show. Okay, because I was about to read production again. But I'm just like, Apollo popped up. Again, there was no context. They didn't really get into the Apollo of it all. But okay, Apollo was there. Why is Apollo so close to Sheree? So anyway, bring him back as well. My next note is Bob is a fool. But that thoroughly entertained me. That's really all I have. I love that the ladies grilled him. They still kind of had Sheree's back, and they're like, "What the hell is going on?" And there's that famous screen grab that's been all over Twitter of all the ladies just like. I wish that we had gotten more of Cynthia, though, this episode. Not that she's obliged to do so, because I've already made it clear that she's not a housewife, she's not a friend, so she doesn't have to do anything, but I just enjoyed Cynthia. I thought it was fun. I enjoyed it. Bob was entertaining. Sheree is a fool. Martell's a fool. Bob is also a fool. But I had a really good time. Cairo's nice to look at. That baby was tired. The baby was cute. The event was cute. The finale is next. So, I am interested to see. Obviously, the finale is going to have to end with some type of all-cast event. And, I don't know. I hate... I don't know. We'll see what happens. And, I just feel like... At the end of the day, the way that they're covering the divorce is just really kind of messy. Ralph and Drew's divorce. I understand that it occurred after filming Wrapped, and they had to kind of come back and do some pickups or whatever, so they're kind of throwing it in there. But still, like, if I was producing a show, let's take a little bit extra time to piece some things together a little bit better and make these episodes make a little bit more sense and tie the episode through 15 episodes as opposed to 1.5. I just don't know. They act like they had already edited the other 14 episodes and locked them in a Disney vault and couldn't go back and do any editing. Like, it's such a dropped ball. It's several dropped balls. And it's just upsetting. But, I'll give a full... I just hate to get into the weeds of it, but I'll give a full analysis of how I feel about the season. But as of episode 15, I'm just a little bit flustered. But thank you, Bob, for this episode, and I will see y'all at the finale.